This is Mayor. What is your response to the recent National Fair Housing Report that found in Grand Rapids and nationwide that foreclosed properties in communities of color are not maintained by banks to the same standards compared to predominantly white neighborhoods? So it mentions neglect damages neighborhood property values and drains local tax revenues, all of that sort of thing, all the things that are factors when neighborhoods aren't maintained equally.
Right. Well, of course, the foreclosure crisis in the country has really, I think, exposed the soft underbelly of our economy, and that's nowhere more evident than in the way properties are maintained when they go back to a lender. Grand Rapids had its share of foreclosed properties. I believe the final numbers that I was seeing was that 1 in 7 properties in Grand Rapids went through a foreclosure. Okay. Now, there may have been some redemptions that came out of that, where people were able to get their house back or save their house during the foreclosure redemption period. But enormous numbers in neighborhoods all over our city, and in price ranges from the very most affordable to the very most expensive. Properties went into foreclosure. Banks, especially I would say out of town, out of state banks, the national banks doing business in our community and elsewhere, didn't pay the kind of attention to maintaining those properties that they should have. The Fair Housing Center of West Michigan was part of a national class action suit against Bank of America, in which Bank of America was shown to have used discriminatory practices in maintaining its foreclosed properties, as our writer has indicated. And there was a large settlement that came to the Fair Housing Center here in Grand Rapids. A settlement that's being used now to aid others who are in foreclosure, as well as make some improvements in neighborhoods around our city. I think that the highlight in the question, though, is this differential management of properties in neighborhoods that are predominantly of color. So because nationally, and in Grand Rapids is no different, there is a higher incidence of poverty among communities of color than among white communities. I would suggest that is itself an evidence of racism in employment and hiring and perhaps education. But those homes tend to be in neighborhoods where sales are more difficult. If I'm a bank and I foreclose on a property in East Grand Rapids, I'm likely going to be able to turn that property over, if I maintain it well, turn it over more quickly than I am in the city of Grand Rapids in a neighborhood that is predominantly African American or predominantly Hispanic. I'm likely going to sit on this house longer. It also probably has a lower loan balance than the house in East Grand Rapids, so I'm under more pressure from the comptroller of the currency to get rid of this $200,000 mortgage as opposed to this $40,000 mortgage in the city. And so I think what's happened is banks finding themselves overwhelmed, inundated with foreclosures, turn to the easiest properties first, the properties that would be marketable, more readily marketable, and they made their investments in those houses and they let others go. That's been exposed. That practice has been exposed in this report, and the city of Grand Rapids has been really aggressive in going after lenders, national and local lenders, on maintaining their properties, because there's nothing, as our writer points out, that will bring down the quality of life and the values of other properties in the neighborhood than a lot of boarded up foreclosures that are, going to rot and dust. We've been much more successful in working with our local banks and lending institutions than we have with the big nationals. Trying to talk to somebody in Boston and say, "Hey, you got a property over here on Logan Street that's fallen apart. You need to get in and maintain that property." All too often you get, "Oh, sure, we'll do that," and nothing happens.
Okay.
Local lenders have been much more responsive to our concerns.
So you were aware of the report and just some of the figures here that this is a real problem here in Grand
Indeed.
Rapids as well.
Indeed.